Hello, and welcome to the Tips with Toni podcast. I'm Toni Marinucci, your registered dietitian, helping you get healthy one bite at a time. I'm so excited for you to meet this very next guest. She is a friend of mine, a running coach, a registered dietitian, and business owner of Racing to the Kitchen, which is, if that's not like the best name ever for exactly what she does, I don't know what else is. Very on brand. So good. So anyways, Shelbi Thurau is amazing. I'm so excited for you to hear from her, her story, her expertise. Shelbi, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. That was such a lovely introduction. I feel so warm and fuzzy to start talking.
Well, I mean it, and you're welcome. And yeah, so my favorite part, I think, about my podcast is I know other podcasts, they have these very fancy where they like introduce people with their bios and whatnot, but I like to have my guests introduce themselves. So why don't you share with me who you are, what you do, and more importantly, why you do what you do?
Sure. So like you said, I'm a registered dietitian, an RRCA running coach. And for me, the running actually came before the nutrition piece. I think that one kind of led to the other because as I kind of went through my journey with running and starting to race specifically and sign up for longer distances, it really started to piece together just how grateful I was for what my body was capable of doing and how much better it was at running when I was fueling it properly. And that journey with fitness really connected to, wanting to get into and study nutrition. And then as the past 15 years have gone on with my journey through racing and running, I found myself really wanting to work specifically with runners because I've seen so much, obviously, in just the general population. People are so hard on themselves for what their bodies are and aren't capable of based on what they look like and wanting to achieve certain ideals that, maybe aren't realistic to their lifestyle or realistic, for what they're able to put into this amazing sport. Mm-hmm. And so I think that that's kind of where Racing to the Kitchen came from, was this kind of joy of running, but also joy of fueling, and how the two can intertwine.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's always like a missing component. Like I know when I work with clients, they either like feel really confident with their nutrition, but then their movement patterns are kind of off. Or as they increase their movement, they're not supporting their movement with proper fueling. Like I feel like, and I mean, it makes sense, right? They're new habits, so it's hard to form, but I'm sure that you've definitely, like you've said, you've definitely seen that as well.
For sure. And it's really interesting, the more I work with people on running, to see how many parallels there are between, for example, with weight, people have this certain number on the scale sometimes in their mind, and it's very arbitrary because they read it somewhere or they saw a favorite, celebrity, and that was the ideal. And people do the same thing sometimes with speed. They'll pick out like, I want to run this fast, and it's not really based on anything other than this arbitrary thing. And there are all these parallels as to, are you doing this because you really want to for a deeper purpose? Mm-hmm. And I always try to, the first thing I do with my clients is always kind of generate this deeper why and this deeper reason for why you want to achieve this goal, especially when we're working towards a race, because there's something about crossing that finish line that is so special, and it's so much bigger than just the physical goals or expectations that we put on ourselves.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that is so important. I always tell people when you start falling off, and also I think the why is also important when you start to struggle, or you're like, oh, it's not worth it. I don't feel like doing it. I don't care,
Absolutely.
That's so important.
Yeah, we always have to have those things that go deeper. And it sometimes can sound, I think when you're first starting, a little bit out there and, oh, well, I just want to finish this race, and, you simplify it. But when you get a little bit deeper and have that connection point to the motivation, especially, when you're training for something, it's going to demand, a bit of time when you're doing these marathons and half marathons, and you really need kind of that why to go back to.
Yeah, it's a big commitment. It's a really big commitment. I think people get caught up in the moment of I think they like forget that choosing to do a half marathon or a marathon is hard, whether you're a runner or you're not, you don't even consider yourself a runner. Like that's a big commitment to make. You have to dedicate a lot of time and energy into it.
For sure. And that's what makes it so wonderful when it's done, is because it isn't just this, you put in a week and you do it, or, you just like decide one day. And of course there are, those kind of like freak athletes who you hear they, finished a marathon just like amazingly. But for the most part, it is, that time commitment. But I think that that's what makes it such a beautiful thing to work on, and really, get to know yourself and your relationship with fitness and food, because it isn't something that happens overnight. And it's this really wonderful way to kind of work on yourself and not have that kind of fast solution expectation that can so often be a barrier to us actually achieving our health goals, because we're expecting these quick results. But when you sign up, like I have, a lot of people coming to me right now who are signing up for races in October, or even giving themselves more time and thinking about, spring 2022. And it's funny because that's how talking in the running space works. We look really far out because, you're signing up for races that sometimes fill up really quickly, or, that you've been waiting a year or two to get in. So there is a lot of emotion that tends to get, involved when it comes to achieving these race goals. And I think that's my favorite part about working with my clients, is getting to just be a small part of their journey, because it really is that. It really is this process to getting to that point of crossing a finish line and what that feeling is like.
Yeah. And I think I would like to circle back to your comment where I think people do things like they say they're doing a half marathon or a full marathon or whatever to cross the finish line, but like their deep rooted issue, I think often lies in like wanting to lose weight. I know personally that's where my journey started. So how can we help someone maybe detach from this belief that running more is going to help them lose weight, or maybe a better question, like what are the whys that are stronger than weight loss? Because I feel like anyone, regardless if it's a running goal, any goal, if it's your only focus or your main focus is weight loss, you're basically signing up for a huge disappointment.
Well, you couldn't be more right about that, because a bit of a spoiler alert, but a lot of times when you are training for long distance, because of the volume of training, the initial reaction that your body has is sometimes it does hold on to weight, because you've introduced this new stress, this new exercise, and it knows it needs to provide the energy. The most common way that we talk about long distance running training and, people eating is, you can't expect your car to go X distance if you don't give it the amount of gas, and you can't run on empty, quite literally. Yeah. So I think that you have to remove that expectation, because if that is what it's about, then you may be disappointed. And that's not to say that with appropriate fueling, if your body is, knows that expectation of how much it's going to work out and understands, how much it can kind of let go of from a weight perspective, it can happen, but it should be almost like the cherry on top, if you will, because, to date, and I don't think this has changed since the last time I looked it up, but to date, less than 1%, of people in the world have completed a full marathon. So that in and of itself is an incredible statistic to be a part of, when you're able to accomplish that, no matter what speed you run it at. That's incredible. Yeah. So to then go back to what you're saying with your why, for me, this journey of running marathons, ties to something, very deep. I was in a car accident in 2016, and my fiance passed away, and we had this goal together to run. He was going to do a half and I would do a full marathon in every state. And to be able to continue along that journey and still accomplish something that's so good for me, body and soul, and that connects me back to something that when something like that happens, there's so much that you may never have in your life again, or at least you certainly won't have with the person that you thought you would. So when you're able to still act on these goals that you once had and honor someone's memory in that way, there is this, really beautiful through line to it. And so for me, even if I run a marathon in a state and it's my slowest one, even if I were to maybe have to walk a whole one, if it came to that someday, there is so much more to that goal. And that's not to say that, everybody's reason has to reach quite so, poetically, but the more you talk to people, and certainly the more you talk to runners, this community is so beautiful because of all the stories people have of what it means to them to do what they do. And I'm always amazed the more people that I get to know of just how it connects us kind of as human beings. And I truly love that, again, about the journey of the sport.
Yeah, that's very special that you run in your fiance's memory, and that is powerful. And like you said, not everyone, it maybe their reason hopefully doesn't come from a trauma, but like you said, as humans, It's pretty often that it does. Like one of my really good friends ran the New York City Marathon. She's ran it twice, but the first time she ran it was probably like 8 years ago. I don't know. And I went to go cheer her on, and I will never forget that day. Like I was so emotional because I was watching, like you said, the community, the support, everybody being there for everyone. And then seeing so many people of all ages, of all disabilities, so many disabilities of people running with disabilities. I was mind blown, literally mind blown. And I think you're right. Like it comes down to something so much deeper and often on an emotional level. Like if you're doing it solely for the physical, oh my God, I can't even imagine like how torturous that would be. But like, you're right. Like it really does come down to the connection, to the emotion, to the support. Yeah, guys, those who are listening, if you've never just participated in watching, like if you want to run one, I'll watch you. I'm not running one. But like if you ever just want to be inspired.
We always need cheerleaders.
Oh my God. Like I was literally so inspired that whole week. I was just like on cloud nine. I just couldn't believe it. I was so joyful and happy just to know that like so many people were doing something that they put their mind to and following through with it. And then they had the support and oh my God, it's really special. If you've never watched one, like I'm sure being in one is also quite special. Like even watching one is special.
Being a spectator is certainly, I mean, that's actually, before I started running, I was in school at Boston College. So the Boston Marathon was this huge event every year. And at the first 2 times I watched it, I hadn't started my running journey yet. I started my junior year of college. So I couldn't understand it, but I saw people at kind of the breaking point, because Boston College is at mile like 20, 21 at the top of this hill where everybody is just like, reaching deep for that mental motivation, because the physical, goes out the window at that point. And, you're like, something's happening here that people would put themselves through this. And it's okay if you don't quite get it. But speaking from someone who literally, when I was in high school, like I would have, rather fallen down the stairs than the day where you had to run the single mile. And I have, one of my best friends from middle school can attest to that. Things change. And I think with exercise too, is sometimes you have to try new things and new challenges to find the things that you really love. And that's the great thing about fitness, is there is something out there for everybody. It's just personally for me and wanting to work with runners. And again, that can be anybody. I work with people who are, looking to run their first race, and that's a 5K in a certain amount of time. It's another wonderful thing about running is there's constantly a next step for you to go. So, you're never maxing out. If you've run a marathon, maybe you're going to do an ultra. If you've run a 5K, maybe you're going to do it faster if you have no interest in going long distance. There is something for everybody in the sport. And you don't have to wait to start. I think going back to people's perception of, who they have to be when they start running is that's one of the things that I get, like, oh, I feel like I have to run, under a 12-minute mile before I can start training for a race. And that's so not true. And I'm sure, to your point of when you watched a marathon, you saw that as well. There is no such thing as this is what a runner looks like. If you are moving forward, you are a runner. And I can attest to that from the spectrum of people that I've worked with, so different. And there is no like singular definition of what a runner looks like by any means.
I love that. I love that. All right, so let's get into the juicy stuff, because I know everyone wants to know what to eat or what not to eat, or if you could maybe speak to like some common misconceptions. I feel like right now I think we should address this, because as you were talking about, putting fuel in your car and going the distance, and, you really need to fuel your body. But, we also live in a society where intermittent fasting is super trendy. Fasted cardio is like the thing to do. Can you please speak to that?
Absolutely. It's so funny because I just had this happen with a friend recently. They had quite an awful run. And, when you don't know the whole scenario and you're not working with somebody, you don't want to, point to something. But I found out that they had started to kind of fast and like explore that. And, I don't want to blame it on that. But again, it can be tricky, and it's not something that I support. And quite frankly, when I started to do more research into the running community and explore more kind of like beginner runners forums, I was kind of shocked to find out how many people were doing intermittent fasting, as runners, because it is so important to have fuel in the gas tank. So that said, a lot of times people do avoid eating because they are worried about what it's going to do to their stomach, because a lot of people do have GI issues, which let's just, take it for what it is. If you're running, especially if you're running for a long period of time, you are quite literally shaking your stomach up and down a little bit for that entire time that you're running. So you can't blame it too much, even if your nutrition is perfect. But my biggest tip before I get into any specifics of things I like to recommend is whatever it is, just trial it out and track how it makes you feel. It's so important for runners to evaluate, noticing, for example, I love like stir fries, and like white rice is my carb of choice compared to my running friends. They love pizza. That works for them. Like they like Italian food the night before they run a long run. That would not work for me. And I know that from trial and error. And then as far as the morning of, if you really feel uncomfortable eating right before or waking up really early, if you're a morning runner, you can, load your carbs leading up to that, but you absolutely need them. You cannot get around that. Carbs are your energy. That is what is going to get you through that finish line. And it's what's going to make you feel good, because the last thing you want is to feel like garbage when you're training for this, because then you're not going to want to train for another one if it wasn't a good process for you.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for bringing up carbs, because most people are often doing keto with intermittent fasting together. I'm glad that you, are reminding us that we need to eat to fuel, and carbs are the best first source of energy for our bodies.
For sure. And there are, supplies specifically for runners, chews and gels and things that, are made to deliver those quick carbohydrates. I actually fuel a lot. I love dates and other dried fruits. Like I use craisins is my carb of choice for during a run, because it works for me. Some people use pretzels. There's plenty of options for, food that is food, so that you don't have to necessarily go out of your way to get, something like that from a running store. And it gets you comfortable again with kind of, these foods are good for me. Like look at what, a pretzel, which there are people who, they have these food fears because they did, low carb or no carb diets for so long. It's hard for them to believe that certain foods can actually serve them in a positive way. And running can be really healing in that way, because, you see what you're achieving. So if you watch me on Instagram, I'm always posting I have my dates with peanut butter is my like number one that I love to have before a run. But any of your like breakfast carbs, your waffles or toast in the couple of hours before you run, anything under an hour, you know, I don't want to seem like I'm anti like running on an empty stomach, but if you're going for under an hour and you feel comfortable with that, you're good. But make sure that you're eating something in a 4-to-1 ratio of carbs to protein when you return so that you optimize that muscle recovery.
Okay. So when you say, you know, you're saying under an hour before, are you saying you can eat if when you say under an hour, you mean your runs under an hour, or are you saying
your runs under an hour?
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. That's what I wanted to clarify.
If your run or your total workout is under an hour, that you can do, you know, without eating, if you're an AM person. Right. Generally, if you're working out later in the day, you've probably had some food or fuel, hopefully, before you're, you know, putting in that time. And then for, you know, anything in that like 60 to 90 minute range, that's when you're going to want to start having, you know, a carbohydrate beverage, like a coconut water that even has like the sugars in it. Again, trialing different things, because like I said, learning what works for your stomach is an important part of running, because different things work for different people, and different levels of hydration are also going to affect that too. We can't talk about fueling with running without talking about the importance of staying hydrated, especially, you know, in the summertime. You know, the way that you fuel in the winter could actually be different than what works for you in the summer, because of that fluid balance, and how much you sweat can actually affect, you know, the electrolytes and fluids that are going in and out of your GI tract. So it's all about just like noting what works for you, and, you know, making sure when you have a good run, just like when you have a bad one, when you have a good run, oh my gosh, like what did I eat? Like what was that magic kind of formula? Because it generally does work time and time again.
Yeah. And before we jump to other things other than your food, that was probably the magic formula, because like sleep, I would love to talk about like alcohol, sleep, like I want to talk about all that stuff. But before we go to there, I feel like some people who might be listening, maybe they're new to running. So maybe they're doing more like walk, jog. So maybe they're out there for over an hour, but they're not necessarily running the entire time. Would you say that rule still applies to them in the way that they would fuel, and when they come home, have something carbohydrate rich with some protein?
That's such a good question. And I actually think intensity does make a difference. And personally, if you're going to do even like 45 to 60 minutes of intense exercise, I think then you may need some additional fuel. And for those who are doing walk running, I would say still like 75 minutes or more. If you're going to be out there, you should be cognizant of having something in your stomach. You may experience less GI discomfort because you're not moving your stomach up and down as aggressively as if you are running the entire time. But you're still on your feet, you're still exerting energy. And it's still a good habit to get into, because you are the same way that as soon as you start walking, you want to start integrating time for warm up and stretching to just build those good habits that as you get a little bit more advanced are going to serve you to keep you healthy and injury free. I don't think you can ever get into a bad habit when it comes to those fueling practices.
Right. Yeah, I agree. So yeah, let's talk about the perfect formula outside of your nutrition to make a good run, to get the best out of your run. What would you advise?
It's so funny because I think that when you are racing, a lot of times you're traveling. And so a lot of the things that can make that perfect run during your training can sometimes go a little haywire when you're traveling, because that's a whole other animal. I always love to tell the story of the first time I ran the New York City Marathon. I forgot to pack pajamas and my like pre-race fuel. And I had to like go and I like slept in like a tank top and jeans in the hotel room. And I had to buy like an oatmeal cup. And I was like, okay, this is what it is. So, again, just kind of like being responsible for for the things that you like to eat. But getting decent sleep is so important. A lot of the things that we always talk about as ancillary life habits to nutrition certainly apply to running as well. I think the one outlier maybe is when it comes to stress. I think that running can be really special as a form of dealing with that in a way that food sometimes isn't, or it's not quite as linear as it is with running, that, going for a run a lot of times can really help you kind of like manage stress in the short term. But that being said, and I did this back during Mental Health Awareness Month, I think it was, I made sure to post that while running can be therapy, it is in no way a replacement for it. So it's wonderful if you found it to be this outlet for stress in the short term, but in a lot of cases, it shouldn't substitute actual therapy. So I always make sure, to remind my clients of that when, things are difficult, and running is a form of coping, but it can't always be the only thing.
Right. Which is I think is with anything, like, you never want to just have like one tool in your toolbox especially when it comes to coping and with stress and help in dealing with your mental health. Like, I think like having many options and many choices, but yeah, I mean, I hear that again and again from people that like for them running is just like, they do it so much more for their mental health than for their physical health, which I think they're both for your health. Yeah. Like, so it's not like good or bad. It's like you said, there's a fine line, but I think that it is important for people, to go to something like running versus like alcohol or drugs or self-harm or self-sabotage, or just like, bumming around and not getting, avoiding their to-do list and like, just like, there's worse things that we can do to cope with our stress.
Sure. And again, I think it circles back to the benefits again that are so much more than that, like physical, like I want to lose weight, I want to, shrink this or grow that. It can end up being such a way to clear the mind and be so wonderful in that sense, for sure. Yeah. And then what you said with like tools in the toolbox, I think that that's where making sure that in terms of that like perfect formula, making sure you're stretching, making sure that you are warming up and prioritizing that, 10 minutes more of running and getting maybe like an extra mile or distance is never as important as taking that time to stretch. And that's almost similar to, one thing you said resonated with me, like you can't always go for a run if you're using that as a coping mechanism, which is why it can't be the only tool in your toolbox for stress. Most of us in the middle of the night, like if something's bothering us, I mean, some people may go for a run, maybe you have your treadmill, but chances are you're going to need some other, forms of maybe meditation and breathing exercises to cope with that. So, it's all part of, I think sometimes running can kind of turn you towards self-care and be a gateway into that as well, because you realize that taking that time, especially for busy people and, people with kids. I have one of my best friends she was a cross-country runner. She had 3 kids very much in a short span of time. And she's getting back into running now. And to hear her talk about the joy that taking that, half hour to 45 minutes for herself a few times a week brings her, it just makes me so happy because it is so important and it is a form of self-care and it's a great thing.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Oh my God. I feel like there's so many questions. I have so many things I want to talk about. Cause you mentioned about like the warm up and the stretching. And I feel like you guys let me know if I'm lying or I'm not right or whatever, but I think those are listening who are runners are not doing those things most of the time.
Okay. So I just had a drastic, I've always warmed up and I'm pretty good with stretching. But I got injured this year for the first time. I tripped. It wasn't like I overtrained. It wasn't entirely my fault. But the process of injury recovery has taught me so much and made me seek out more education in this field than I think I would have in certain areas had I not gotten injured. So it was definitely a lemons into lemonade kind of thing for me. And I actually recently started working with a physical therapist specific to runners. And I have stretches and warm-ups specific to kind of my shortcomings as a runner and specific to still recovering from that injury, even though I am well. And I find that that has made me more inclined to even want to take that time that I was already taking. And I actually think a lot of times runners don't do it because they feel silly about it. Like they know what they're supposed to do. They know those like couple of dynamic warm-ups or those couple of stretches, and they're not entirely sure, is this what I need? So if you feel that way, certainly I can on a surface level answer some of those questions as a running coach. But if you are concerned about the form in which you run, or you do, struggle with tight muscles or, any sort of pain, it's not a bad idea to check in, with a PT or DPT and take care of yourself in that way too. I think the biggest thing when people start out running is they don't see themselves as athletes. And the minute that you start doing this on a regular basis, in my mind, my clients are athletes and you deserve to take care of yourself. You deserve customized training. You deserve to be fed and feel good. And sometimes you deserve that level of care, when it comes to rehabbing yourself or making sure on your rest days or after a run, you're taking care of yourself in ways that are going to make that next run feel that much better.
Yeah, I think that's so true. So what you're saying is that things like the warm up and stretching often will hopefully prevent a injury, or can help if you with the right, it'll basically
100%.
help heal it. Yeah, prevent an injury. What are some other things people can do to prevent injury if they're a runner?
Staying focused on your own journey with running and not going out too fast or building up your volume too fast, or doing both at the same time. People, it's very easy to get excited when you're training. The first marathon, I tell this story all the time. The first marathon I trained for, I downloaded an app like I found on the App Store and was like, generate training plan. Yeah, this is the time I want to finish in. Sure. And I jumped my mileage from probably like about 17 miles a week to 30 in the first week, so almost doubling it. And that Sunday last run of the week ended with me in a park crying like about 8 miles into a 12-mile run because I was just maxed out. I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And you don't just want to see how your friend trained or, Google search the first training plan that comes up. I have a service like specifically just for people who need custom training plans, but don't necessarily need the support, because I seek to help all runners with whatever solutions they need. And I think that is a huge way to stay on course, is just to take it slow. You'll get there. It's why you need that longer amount of time. And it's okay if you need, to maybe wait to do the longer distance for the next race season. You'll be so much happier not getting hurt, not hating it because you did too much too fast, or missing your goal by maybe a lot because you just needed a couple more months to get there. There's always a way to achieve where you want to be in a race. It's just following your journey and not, letting, someone else's or what you think you're supposed to be doing in the amount of time, or again, like the distance, the speed. You have to kind of start with a blank slate for you. And that's going to really serve you well if you just stay focused on your individual journey with running and nobody else's.
Oh, I love that. I feel like that's like, that was the cherry on top. We could like totally end it there. We're not going to end just yet, but that was great. Is there anything else that we didn't cover that you think it's important for the listeners to know?
I would say that in this past like year and a half, where people I think got into running, and for those who are already into running, did a lot of virtual races, embracing even the virtual running community. And for as much as, I just have to stay focused on your individual training journey, I think take comfort and joy in the running community around you, and find support, whether that is in, a coach, whether that's in a local group of runners, or whether that is in a virtual group of runners, because feeling like you're part of something bigger while you are on that individual journey is also going to be something that motivates you, in addition to your own personal reasons for why you're training. So, seek out that kind of community in whatever way is going to best serve you as a runner. So maybe that's, again, a walk run community. Maybe it's a community that's trying to qualify for Boston. Maybe it's a community of running moms. Having that support is really helpful. And I'm certainly always here. Again, that's my favorite part of this entire journey with this business, has been just getting to be a part of people's experiences with racing. It's wonderful, and I just love it.
Awesome. Yeah. So where can people find you and get that support from you?
Sure. So the best way to find me is on Instagram at Racia to the Kitchen. You can find out everything about my services there, or just shoot me a DM or an email at raciatothekitchen@gmail.com. And I'd be happy to hop on a video with you and talk through all things running and your goals, and see how we can help you to get there.
Awesome. Guys, go give her a follow. This has been so helpful. I know you have so many more tips and tricks up your sleeve, so we can't cover it all in a podcast, but guys, she's a wealth of knowledge, so make sure you give her a follow on Instagram. Before we wrap up, how many marathons have you ran?
So I've done 19. 2 of them are virtual, and I've done a full, yeah. And I've done 17.
2 full virtual marathons.
I did, yes.
Was anybody with you? I know it sounds, because it's virtual, but like, did you have someone with you, or?
Yeah. So I did the virtual Marine Corps Marathon in October 2020 and ran it with several of my friends who I do my long runs with. And we made it a really wonderful experience. We had mile markers, we had a finish line. It was great.
Wow.
And then I did in January 2021, right before I got injured, I did the virtual Dopey Challenge, which is part of the Run Disney Race series, where I did the 5K, 10K, half and full in consecutive 4 days. And that full, my friends did the second half with me. So I did most of it by myself, but the second half I had my cheering squad who absolutely got me through to the end.
Oh my God, wait, time out for a second. Because I did see that and I thought that it was a full marathon. But what you're saying is that before the full marathon,
yeah,
you ran a half marathon. And before
Correct.
that you ran a 10K. And before that you ran a 5K. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
Yeah. Why it's dopey.
Wait, and it was virtual?
Yeah.
How many days in a row?
You do it in, well, I mean, I guess virtually you could do it however you'd like, but I did it the way that you would do it if it was in person. So it's consecutive days. You do it Thursday through Sunday.
Oh.
And in Disney, it's worse because you're waking up at usually like 3 a.m. because you do it before the parks open. So that was nice, not having that extra challenge as part of it. That made a big difference.
Oh my God, you guys, most of you are watching. I know some of you can watch on the video, but most of you are listening. My mouth was just like to the floor. What was that recovery like? Like, how long did you need to sleep and rest? And like I ran a half marathon. I ran 1 half marathon, have not ran since. I ran 1 half marathon that I really did train for. Like, I didn't just like decide, like I really trained for it. I felt really good about it when I finished, but for 3 days after, I could not walk. I was like, everything was just like, oh my God, like getting in and out of cars, using the bathroom. Oh my God, it was really hard.
I think one of the blessings of a virtual marathon is that you do get to like sleep in your own bed that night and you're not traveling. I mean, I've done ones where I'm getting in the car to drive home that day. And those ones you're like truly in bad shape the next day after you then sat in the car for 6 hours to like drive home from some state. But if you train, like I trained appropriately for the race. So it really wasn't much different than recovering, from a long run or another marathon, because the training mirrored what the race was going to be like. And that's what it's all about. If you have a solid training cycle, then you don't have to worry too much about the shape you're going to be in, barring accidents, because literally, I think 2 weeks later was when I was 0.1 miles into a 10-mile run with my friends and fractured my ankle. So that happened, but we're back and racing's back, and I'll be on a starting line in the fall. So, God willing, knock on wood. And
oh my God. So every time you run, do you run to beat your time, or is it more so?
Absolutely not.
No.
I am much more into the endurance. In addition to wanting to run all 50 states, I know the time is coming where I'll get into ultras, which is anything defined as anything over the 26.2 distance. Because I love the endurance. I don't have a lot of speed goals, because to me that could potentially take away from a lot of my joy. But that's what works for me, and I find that a lot of times when I am focusing on speed, it's sometimes, not as good for me. So, again, going back to like, I don't have to. I'm not training for the Olympics anytime soon. I have my goals, and that's what works for me and keeps me happy and keeps me running. And different things work for everybody.
Yeah.
For sure.
Oh, I love that. This has been amazing. Guys,
so much fun.
So much fun. Definitely go give Shelbi a follow. If you're not already subscribed to the Tips with Toni podcast, definitely hit that subscribe button. A new episode comes out every Tuesday and Thursday. And when you're subscribed, you don't miss a beat. If you like this episode, take a screenshot of it, tag me, tag Shelbi, let us know what you thought. And if maybe it inspired you to run, maybe inspired you to fuel before your run, I don't know, whatever it inspired you to do, let us know. We'd love to celebrate you. And that's it from us. Thank you so much for listening. As always, this is Toni Marinucci, your registered dietitian, helping you get healthy one bite at a time.